Valley, but we're all up and running now. So as you will be aware, the aim of these webinars is to support colleagues who are on their adoption journey for the NEP and move us forward. And so you can get the absolute best out of the products that we are rolling out across Forces at the moment. As normal, the webinar is going to be recorded and it will be available later on today on the Enabling Centre and on the NEP website. And again, you can go back and watch any of our previous webinars at any time to go back into them. Please put your questions into the chat. We'll try and get to a few questions at the end. And if you have any more information or want any further detail, you can get to us via our website and our email address of nepinfo@transformation.police.uk, or speak to your local force implementation team or delivery managers, etc. Today, we're going to be focusing on Teams, which is the most commonly used application in the Microsoft 365 suite, but it's only one small part of it. But just to give you an idea, 137,000 officers and staff used Teams last month across the UK policing. So it's a phenomenal, powerful tool that is well adopted. But it's absolutely critical that teams are in the right team, are able to collaborate and gain the right information, but not being overpowered with lots of information. And it can be quite daunting for forces to work out how to manage the teams on Teams. So today we're going to be first joined by Nick from Microsoft, who's going to take us through some of the basic functionality and define some of the basics on how Teams works and how you as a user can use them. But then Brian from Thames Valley and Hampshire IT are going to take us through what's happened in actual force detail and show us a fantastic solution they've been able to develop that will allow forces to really manage teams effectively. And the great news is that solution, because we all share the same blueprint, can work in your force. So that will be available on the new Solutions Centre in the next couple of weeks, so you can download and take all the guidance from there. So thanks very much to our guests for joining us. And first of all, let's go over to Nick. And can you explain what the roles are within a team and some basics, and share your screen to show what's going to be going on?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me just share my screen a second. So I think the first question, David, is really what is a team? Because that thing can be quite confusing, because when Teams came about, we had sort of applications like Word, PowerPoint, Excel that we were all very used to, and then Teams landed. And what is a team? So when you think about a team, think of it as a group of people that are coming together to get something done. Now, that team of people within the forces could be maybe like the intelligent briefings team, or the control room team, or the MARAC team, something like that, that are getting together to get a piece of work or a series of work, a program of work to get that done. And in that team, they can chat, they can have meetings, they can co-author and share documents to get that piece of work moving. And there are a couple of roles within a team, if I just show you here. So I've got an NEP team here on my screen. If I just click on the three dots and click on Manage Team, you can see some different types of access here. You could be an owner like Megan is here, or we could also have members and guests. Now, the difference between these different types of access, so the owner is more of an admin role. They can approve people having access to this team. So they can also promote people. So for example, Nesta down here, Nesta could be an owner. Best practice is you need at least two owners, just in case someone's off sick, not on the right shift. And so you get somebody to administrate it together for yourselves. Now, what a guest can do, if, for example, here we have a guest that needs to have access, what you can do several things. As the owner, I could, if I wanted to, click on my three dots and I could get link to my team. So I'm just going to copy that one, and I'm just going to bring over another person here, another part of my demo tenant, a lady called Joni. If I can just click that out of the way. Sorry, my little presenter's in the way. There we go. Now, Joni doesn't have access to the NEP tenant at the moment, but Megan has shared that link with her. So what Joni can do is just paste that link into Edge. So cancel that, and yes, I'll use the web version, and it will pop up a little box to say, okay, you can have access. There you go. Would you like access to the NEP? Yes, please. I'm just going to click on join. And then the experience here, just move that one out of the way again. What you'll find here, there you go. Within the application teams for Megan, as she is the owner of this particular team, you'll see that Joni's requested access. So that's one easy way of getting people into your team. You could share that little link, and then the owners of that team can click on accept to get that person in. The other thing the owner can do, or the owners can do, back into that membership here, they could actually add member here. So if I wanted to, I could start typing somebody else in the team, and then I can add them, and then they would appear within the list of members and guests. The difference with here with the guest is somebody that's external to my tenants. That's not part of this Contoso tenant. And the way that I added this guest, again, I just clicked on add member, and I actually just typed in the email address, the Office 365 ID of somebody outside of my tenant. That works really well for things like Marek, where you get your multi-agencies communicating and working together in that team.
An important point on that, Nick, a lot of forces will have that locked down to allow that to go on, and that's part of the admin process that goes on. But certainly when you're in your own tenant and you want to build your own little teams, that can be a really powerful part to bring people in within the force to form a small team to tackle an issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just adding into that, Dave, there is something else that you can do, and it's just a very easy way of getting people into your team. As that admin or that owner, if I click on the settings, I've got something down here called team code. And what I can do is advertise that code within my force if I want a series of people to join that team. So if this team is going to be quite large, 100+ people, rather than me sitting here and adding all these members individually, I could go to settings and I could advertise this code. Now, when I advertise this code, a little bit of a gotcha. Just make sure you know that actually once anybody adds that code into Teams, they get automatically joined. And the way that they get, or the way that they use this code is just at the bottom of your screen within Teams here. You've got join or create a team. If you click on that one, you get enter a code. If you copy and paste that code in, you get automatic entry into that code, into that team. So just remember a little bit of a gotcha there, that you do bypass that approval process because you have got that special code from that owner.
So that can be really powerful for staff associations and social groups, for instance, or learning groups who need to move that forward. So your screen share seems to have dropped out, I'm afraid, Nick.
Oh, let me stop it. It still looks shared to me, but I will share it again.
Just send it live, see if we can get you. Yeah.
There you go. You got it again.
Thank you.
Okay, there was a couple of other things that I wanted to show you here, David, today. There's other ways of managing a team. Say, for example, you're in a team, but maybe you've left that project team or that business team. You can easily leave the team as an individual just by clicking on your 3 dots and clicking on leave the team. It doesn't delete the team, everything still stands, everybody else has access, but you can, if you wanted to, leave the team by that route there. The owner of the team can also remove people. So, for example, we just added Diego, didn't we? If I wanted to, I could click on the little box down there next to member, and then Diego has the access to Diego has been revoked by that owner of that group as well.
That's fantastic. So that's the out-of-the-box solution that comes from Microsoft. I'm going to turn over to Brian in a second. Brian, you had over 700 teams at the moment across the 2 forces. Could you explain how you and your team have approached managing the teams in your forces? And if you want to share your desktop, that'll be really helpful.
Hi everyone, thanks for that. It's Brian Wilson from the Thames Valley architecture team. So last year we embarked upon an accelerated adoption of teams in Thames Valley and Hampshire Constabulary. One of the things so as part of phase 1, we're focused on IAM, voice and video, and I'm sure most of you probably done similar levels of implementing that functionality. The phase 2 is really around deploying Teams workspaces. And I guess one of the desires was not to have a free-for-all type scenario where there was just millions of teams being created and people were creating them and not using them, or they were being created not for a valid purpose. And we're worried about how information would be managed across those teams or team workspaces. So phase 2 is all about how we did that. So what we did to do that is we built a team and site provisioning solution that managed that end-to-end process. So as part of that solution, what we did is we created a MS Teams app, so that's something that appears directly in the inside of your Teams client. In the same way you see the chat icon or the files icon, you'll be able to see a little request icon, and I'll demo that to you now. So we had a wizard. The wizard was an end-to-end set of steps, providing a set of information. The second part of it is once that request was submitted, a workflow that would manage that. And we have some background administration lists that are just simple SharePoint lists that manage some of the additional functionality. And at the end of that, once a valid request was approved, we have a bit of functionality to go away and create that team in a governed way. So with the correct naming convention applied to it, making sure that there's at least 2 owners, as one of the NEP requirements. And then people will be able to use their team. So let me show you a demo of it. I'm showing you the demo in the browser at the moment because I'm logged into the transformation. But this, is pretty, this functionality works exactly the same way inside of our Teams client. So the key thing is that any vessel who can do this, that's completely up to the force. So if you're deciding to implement this functionality in your force, you can choose to make this app available through app setup policies in Teams to everyone. So everyone can go, or if you want to have a select few set of people that manage this process, you can also choose to provide this app just to those people. So the first page of it, is it talks about what is suitable for what is suitable information that can be hosted in Microsoft 365 and what is not suitable, and we provide those details to the user requesting it. We've got a series of site templates and team templates that we can choose. At the moment, there's just one, but in the future there might be other ones, for a particular purpose, maybe a major operation or major crime. If there's a particular template that you'd like, you could easily be able to add it in, and then pre-configure what you think that type of scenario would need from channels and apps point of view. So if I type in NEP live demo, I'd enter a description, and move through the. So you can see that we've got what we do for each of our departments or commands. We ask the user to classify what part of the department, what part of the force they belong to. Because we're a multi-force tenant, we've got more than one. So we've got Hampshire Constabulary and Thames Valley. In the case if there's just one force using the tenant, then you wouldn't need to configure that. So we've also tested this with BCH, so Bedfordshire, Cumbria, and Hertfordshire. They've also implemented this functionality and are planning to use it. And provided us feedback on things to make sure it works in their environment. So we're fairly confident this functionality, if you wanted to use it, you should be able to. So in this case, I might choose the Thames Valley Police, and I might choose, for example, local policing, and I might choose a particular, one of the LPAs. We've also got some free text type ones. So these might, the top part of your classification might be very well known to you, but the bottom part might not be. So you might know that there's a district or a LPA that you have, but you might not know that all the various teams in there. So we've got the way to, for users to add teams in. And you can see these are ones that have been created before from previous deployments. So ICR type ones, you've got inspectors, meetings, taskings. But if there needed to be a new one, we'd be able to add a new one. So for this, for the purpose of this, I'll just do that. And you can see now that configure permissions, we can start typing in various people that we want to be part of the team owners, and we can do the same for team. So you can search and find users, so you don't need to go and type them in, or you don't need to remember the exact email address. And then once you're ready, it's shown a summary of the request. At the bottom, it talks about. So what we've got is something behind the scenes. When you select your department and your sub-department, what we're actually doing is we're actually setting approval settings against those. So there's a couple different ways we can do approval, and it's quite flexible. So you can either choose for a department to be auto-approved, and that's the default state. If you choose for a department or command to have a department approve it, then what will happen is that person will receive an email saying, do you approve of this request by this user? And then we've got like a second stage after that. So after the department approval, we've got an information management team review. So in Thames Valley, we have the Joint Information Management Unit that sits across both Thames Valley and Hampshire. And they review all teams' requests for example, is there a duplicated MS team? Is this a valid type of use of teams, or should it be hosted in a different environment? So at the end of that, I'll select create. And that then sends it off to our flow. the flow goes and processes that. You'll see in my requests now, when this comes up, you'll see that there's a live demo that's come through. For the purposes of saving time, I've just shown in my email what the emails look. So I've pre-done these. You can see this, the type of email you might receive. As you go through the process, you'll see that here's the type of, do you want to approve this the site or to reject it? And then once it's approved, you'll see your site has been approved, and these are the comments for that approve it. So the once the site is created, or the team is created, sorry, you'll get an email saying your team is ready to use, and you'll actually see it appear in your teams list. So that's really a really whistle-stop tour of the solution. There are some administration lists that we have that I mentioned behind the scenes. So, you know, for each request that comes through, we can store that in a new site request list. And for the metadata for the departments and sub-departments, we've got and templates that we want to support. We've got simple lists that we can do that. So here you can see an example of all the various teams. One of the other benefits of this is that we support a naming convention. So you'll notice against each of the requests, this is a live list of the production sites in our environment, in our team's environments. So you'll notice that, you know, you might see TV criminal justice or CJ-CJ. And what that means is that, you know, as we've got over 900 teams that have been deployed so far across all the different departments. But after a while, certain people might be member of many departments or many teams, and because of the number of teams, so having these prefixes makes it quite easy to search for the teams or filter your teams list just by typing TV-CJ, for example. So that's probably a brief overview. There's way more behind the scenes, but yeah.
Thanks, Brian. That's a really elegant solution, and again, thank you for offering to make that available through our solutions centre shortly. How do you go on about managing the functions that are used within the team, so channels or apps and things like that? Does it give you any capability to keep an eye on things?
So we have a governance function that runs through across the teams and makes sure that they continue to be configured in a consistent way. So one of on the files tab across all teams, that's one of our main ones that we're starting off to manage. We want to manage any files that get added into teams in the correct way. So we make sure that there's a base content type. It's basically a way of enforcing metadata against that. And the one bit of metadata we're really interested in right now is the department metadata. So which department is storing a file in this area. In terms of other channels and apps, we manage it probably consistently through the team's experience, the team's administration experience. So we manage what apps are available to everyone to be able to choose from. We also do configure some default channels and tabs. So we've got a default experience we deploy a tasks a channel and a tab, and a OneNote tab. But the actual template allows you to configure that yourself. So once you define the template, if you've got apps that you want to pre-configure for a type of team that you want to deploy, then it's possible to do that. So that's how we do that, through the definition of that team's template.
Thank you. And obviously, one of the key things is you don't want multiple teams that have got similar coverage. So that's obviously a business decision rather than technical decision. So how does the business decide which teams to allow as opposed to just be able to manage that?
So the way we adopted teams was we carefully managed. We researched we went through all the users in the organization, and we worked out which teams existed. So the business change team in Thames Valley and Hampshire worked very closely with each of the departments to define their teams. And we came up with an initial set of teams, and then the business change team, so Tanya Coles and David Atherton and Susan Moore, they went out and actually engaged and said, right, these are the teams that we think that would be applicable to your department or command, and then they worked with them to refine that, and then we went through using the wizard to actually go and create all of them. There's been subsequent, new teams that have been created over time, since we did the initial batch of teams, but they really are managed, I guess, now by, so partly by the business change team as they help ensure that the usage of teams, and I think also by, new people are requesting them, and then the department's approval or the commander, the person in that department can say, right, this is a valid use of teams in our environments. And so that's probably how we manage that process, through that automated site request or team request process.
So it's really about empowering the business to be able to use the tools effectively, but then you've got the full audit capability in the back end of it to be able to manage it effectively in the back for the compliance side.
So one of the things we have from a compliance point of view is just something called just an audit log. So when we monitor, not extensively, but we monitor for a certain set of types of changes that we don't want to support. We will always make sure that, for example, a document library has the enforced metadata on that library. And so if we spot that, we'll add an entry into a remediation audit log for an IT administrator to review. And so that happens on a weekly basis, and an alert is sent to the IT administrator to then go and check what's happened. Sometimes it might be an innocent, configuration issue, or someone inadvertently changed something they shouldn't have. And so that's how we with teams, when someone becomes the owner of a team, they've got quite a lot of responsibility that's given to them by Microsoft out of the box to be able to make changes. Mm-hmm. So the way we did is we don't try to hamper that or go against the grain or go against the tide, so to speak, but more to just pick up where those issues are and work with them to address that if there's something that is being configured in a way that it shouldn't.
Now, in a couple of weeks' time, we're going to invite you back and your colleagues back to talk about how you manage the file archiving and the management, which builds on the framework that you've built here, and that is fantastic. We always try and keep these webinars really short and tight so people can consume, and there's a lot of questions coming in there. And our colleagues from the NEP and Microsoft have been answering them through there. But if I jump on a few questions, and Nick and Brian, you can pick up on them as we move them forward. So if I just go into there. So we've got one question we've got is, can you only invite people from your own force? And that is about the configuration for your force, isn't it, as much as anything?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can configure your tenant to have guest services, to have guests invited in, but that is specific to your configuration.
And on the subject of guests, can you limit the visibility of a guest and restrict what items they can see within the team?
That's a really interesting question. So yes and no. So being a guest in a team, they will be able to see the chat and attend meetings and so forth. But when it comes to sharing files and co-authoring, you could set up some granular permissioning within that SharePoint site that's associated with that team. So it really does depend what you want those guests to see and what you don't want them to see. But it's all about collaboration. So if you invited a guest in, they will be able to see the chat, the meetings, and the tabs that you set up and those channels. But you could, if you wanted to, just be, say, granular around the data within that SharePoint location.
Okay. There's a question here about if there are hundreds of teams with unique permissions, are you finding that this is creating information silos? Probably one for Brian, more in the force positive view. Apologies, Brian, did you get that? If there's hundreds of teams with unique permissions, are you finding that that's creating lots of information silos? But I think your file management helps to manage that, doesn't it?
Sorry, I was just trying to unmute there. We're still working that out, to be honest. What we've got is a very well-structured deployment of teams, and we've tried to avoid overcreating teams. Overcreating the number of teams. In terms of those silos, I guess the way we address that is we've got for each department a department level team, so that there can be information sharing in the social type channel if there needs to be a social type channel, or that they go across the department, and then we've got the team type ones. There are slight changes in how people want to adopt teams in the force, and we haven't been too rigid in terms of enforcing a particular way. So the one type of approach where if you've got, say, a department with multiple sub-departments, there might be a desire for the department to say to the sub-departments, right, bring that all into one team and don't create lots of mini teams which no one can get access to. Mm-hmm. And there's the other type of approach, which is where there's more the case if you need a team, create the team, and we're not too worried about that. So we haven't said because it all depends on the scenario really. So we've just tried to focus on what the scenario is to help them accomplish the goals.
I'm just going to ask one more question before we start to wrap up, but did you roll out corresponding SharePoint sites at the same time as rolling out the teams?
When you deploy a team, you behind the scenes get a SharePoint site. So if that's what, so that when you create that team, you get that SharePoint the group site that's supported by that. So when you add a file into the files tab behind the scenes, you get that that's also hosted and stored in SharePoint. So those teams are available to people. If they go to the files tab, for example, and you click open in SharePoint, you'll see that team site that lives alongside the team that gets deployed.
Fantastic. So there are some more questions in the chat, and I know the colleagues are answering them as we speak, but you don't have to have teams to bring people together either. And that brings us on to the subject of next week's webinar, where we're going to be talking about Yammer. And the way I try and describe the difference between the two, in some ways, Teams is about delivering the service, and Yammer is about that informal collaboration and can help with that. If you want to put them into boxes, it's hard to box all these things in. But we're going to look at Yammer next week to look at when a team isn't required, and we'll be bringing some colleagues in to talk about their experience and think about it as a social media platform. But again, as we promised, we will come back to CVP and HAMPS to look at how they have been able to use their file management in the Teams environment to move things forward. Fantastic session. We had over 120 people attending today, which just shows there's a massive interest in this and there's a huge opportunity. The solution that has been developed will be available through the Solutions Centre in the next couple of weeks or so. We're just going through some QA on that right now. So the Solutions Centre, which is now part of the Enabling Centre, you'll be able to download all those solutions and bring those things forward and see what other colleagues are working on. And really important that if you've got something to share, submit it, get in touch with us, because we want to help each other out as much as possible. So again, Brian got in touch with us as a result of one of our webinars actually, and remember the Enabling Centre's there with all the latest events and newsletters and places you can get involved, including the upcoming strategic NEP roadshows that we're doing next Monday, which we've got again over 100 people coming to that. We did one just before Easter, so that you can get involved and hear what the direction of travel is over the next 12 months. So there's lots of links in the chat. I thank you for your attention again. The recording will be available later on today onto the Enabling Centre and on the NEP website. And I hope you can join us next week when we'll be yammering it out after we've been managing Teams today. So thanks to Nick and Brian for joining us today, and Alice and Tom in the background who've been answering the questions. Again, please get in touch with us if you've got something that you could share with other forces so we can put that out in the Enabling Centre, feature it in a webinar and feature it in the communications. We're all sharing the same technology here. We can borrow with pride and reuse a great deal. So please get in touch. Thanks, everybody.